Guadalcanal, 13th September 1942. A Marine corporal moves through the jungle darkness, his Springfield rifle useless in the tangled vegetation. The Japanese soldier appears 3 feet away. The Marine draws his Mark I trench knife, drives it into the enemy's torso. The blade flexes. The thin metal bends against bone. The pommel, meant to double as a skull crusher, breaks off in his hand. The Japanese soldier's bayonet finds the Marine's throat. The corporal dies clutching a broken knife that was supposed to save his life. This scene repeats itself dozens of times across the Pacific. On Tulagi, a Marine's knife blade snaps during hand-to-hand combat. On Tarawa, another fighting knife's handle splits, leaving the blade loose in its guard. The reports pile up at Marine Corps headquarters in Washington. Combat knives purchased before the war are failing. The Mark I trench knife, with its brass knuckle guard and spike pommel, looks intimidating but proves fragile. The theatre-made improvised knives, forged from salvaged materials, are better than issue equipment. Marines are dying in close combat because their knives break when they need them most. The Corps needs a fighting knife that won't fail, and in upstate New York, a solution already exists. The problem is undeniable by late 1942. The Pacific War is not the war anyone expected. Island warfare means close-quarters combat in jungle terrain where rifles are too long, pistols too slow to reload, and knives become primary weapons. The Japanese excel at night infiltration tactics, slipping into American positions where the fighting turns brutal and intimate. Field reports describe Marines using any blade they can acquire, hunting knives from home, theatre-improvised weapons, even captured Japanese swords. One battalion commander writes that his men have more confidence in privately purchased hunting knives than in issue equipment. The Mark I trench knife, designed for the Western Front's different combat requirements, proves unsuitable. Its thin blade bends, its multi-tool design sacrifices strength for versatility, and its brass knuckle guard actually impedes proper grip. Tests conducted at Quantico confirm the pattern. Quartermasters deliberately stress various knife designs until they fail. The Mark I breaks after modest abuse. Commercial hunting knives fare better but lack standardization. The Marine Corps needs a purpose-built fighting knife with a specific set of characteristics. A blade thick enough to never bend, steel hard enough to hold an edge but tough enough not to shatter, a handle that won't slip when covered in blood, and construction simple enough for mass production under wartime conditions. The man who solves this problem doesn't look like a revolutionary. John Mazarek Davis, born in 1896, grows up in a household where blade making is simply what men do. His father runs a small cutlery operation in Pennsylvania, producing knives for local tradesmen. Young Davis learns to judge steel quality by sound, to understand how different tempering produces different blade characteristics, to recognize that the best designs prioritize function over ornament. By his 20s, he's designing hunting knives for sportsmen who demand reliable tools. His early designs are purchased by major sporting goods retailers. He understands something that many knife makers of his era don't: the difference between a knife that looks impressive and a knife that works when everything goes wrong. By 1928, he's affiliated with Union Cutlery Company in Olean, New York, a firm that would later become synonymous with fighting knives. Whilst other designers are perfecting elaborate multi-blade pocket knives or ornate decorative pieces, Davis is experimenting with fixed blade designs based on a simple principle: in a fight, complexity kills you. He studies military history, reads accounts of trench warfare, understands that combat knives face stresses no hunting blade ever encounters. By 1942, he's already developed working prototypes of what will become the Marine Corps' most iconic weapon. The timing is perfect. The Corps needs exactly what Davis has been building. The design that Davis delivers is revolutionary in its refusal to innovate unnecessarily. The blade is 7 inches long, forged from 1095 carbon steel, a material used in railway springs because it combines hardness with flexibility. The steel is heat-treated to a Rockwell hardness of 56 to 58, hard enough to take a razor edge, but soft enough to bend rather than snap. The blade thickness is a 1/4 inch at the spine, tapering to the edge. This mass makes the knife functionally indestructible under field conditions. The blade profile is clip point, with the spine curving down to meet the edge at an acute angle. This creates a penetrating point strong enough to punch through equipment webbing, leather, and bone. The edge is flat ground from spine to cutting edge, creating a geometry that holds sharpness whilst remaining easy to resharpen with field equipment. The handle is stacked leather washers compressed onto the tang and shaped to fit the hand. Leather compresses when wet but doesn't become slippery. If the handle is damaged in combat, a soldier can remove broken washers and still use the knife. The guard is steel, substantial enough to protect the hand, but not so elaborate it catches on equipment. The pommel is steel, rounded, heavy enough to use as an improvising striking tool, but not a gimmick. The entire knife weighs 14 ounces. It balances at the guard, making it controllable in a thrust. Every element serves a purpose. Nothing is decorative. Davis understands that in combat, soldiers will use this knife to open ration tins, dig foxholes, pry open ammunition crates, cut communication wire, and kill enemy soldiers. The design must survive all of these applications. It must function after being used as a pry bar, after being driven through a steel helmet, after spending weeks in a humid jungle or frozen tundra. And it must be simple enough that wartime manufacturers with no knife-making experience can produce it by the hundreds of thousands. The Marine Corps testing is merciless. In early 1943, quartermasters at Quantico received sample knives from multiple manufacturers. Each knife undergoes identical abuse. Inspectors drive blades through pine boards to test tip strength. They flex blades 90 degrees to test for brittleness. They hack through rope, leather, and metal to test edge retention. They expose knives to salt water, then check for rust. They throw knives into trees repeatedly to test for handle loosening. Most submitted designs fail within hours. Blade tips break, handles split, guards bend. The Davis design, manufactured by Union Cutlery under their Kalbar brand name, passes everything. The final torture test occurs on the 15th of March, 1943. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Griffith personally supervises as a Kalbar knife is used to chop through a 2-inch hemp rope, hammer tent stakes, pry open ammunition crates, and dig a fighting position in frozen ground. The blade is then driven through a 1/4-inch steel plate, not to penetrate it, but to test what happens when the knife meets an immovable object. The tip bends slightly. The inspector grinds it back into shape with a file. The knife continues functioning. Competing designs from other manufacturers suffer bent blades, loosened handles, and edge failure. The decision is unanimous. On the 23rd of April, 1943, the Marine Corps formally adopts the knife as the USMC Mark II combat knife. Union Cutlery will manufacture the majority, but contracts also go to Camillus Cutlery, Case Cutlery, Pal Cutlery, Robeson, and other firms to meet demand. The specified contract price is $2.75 per knife, about $50 in modern currency. Production specifications demand a blade capable of chopping through a 1/4-inch rope with a single stroke and maintaining an edge through sustained field use. The first Marine to prove the knife in combat is Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell Page on Guadalcanal, though by then he's carrying a theatre-acquired K-bar rather than an issue blade. The date is 26th of October 1942, months before official adoption, but after K-bar knives have begun reaching the Pacific through private purchase and irregular supply channels. Page commands a machine gun section on a ridge called Bloody Ridge. Japanese infantry attack in waves through the night. The machine guns fire until their barrels glow. When the crew-served weapons fail from overheating, the fighting turns to rifles. When ammunition runs low, it turns to knives. Page describes multiple instances of hand-to-hand combat where his Ka-Bar never fails. He drives the blade through enemy equipment and into flesh. The knife doesn't bend, doesn't break, doesn't slip in his blood-covered hand. The 7-inch blade provides reach advantage over Japanese bayonets in the confined fighting. The weight provides momentum for slashing attacks. The point penetrates equipment and bone. When dawn breaks, Page and his surviving Marines hold the position. He receives the Medal of Honor for the action. The knife, tested under the maximum stress combat can provide, has performed flawlessly. Page will carry a Ka-Bar for the rest of his Marine Corps service. His account, and hundreds like it, spread through the Corps. When the officially issued Mark II knives begin arriving in late 1943, Marines who had been skeptical of yet another piece of issue equipment become instant converts. The Ka-Bar becomes synonymous with Marine Corps combat power, as iconic as the M1 Garand rifle. Officers carry it, enlisted men carry it, raiders and paratroopers adopt it immediately. The knife's reputation is built not through marketing, but through the most demanding validation possible. It keeps Marines alive in close combat. By 1944, demand for the Ka-Bar is staggering. The Marine Corps needs hundreds of thousands. The Army, seeing Marines' preference for the design, begins acquiring it for certain units, despite having their own fighting knife patterns. Navy construction battalions request it. The original manufacturers cannot keep pace. Contracts expand to companies with no knife-making experience whatsoever. Camillus Cutlery, which had been producing pocket knives, retools for Ka-Bar production. Case Cutlery, known for sporting blades, begins producing military patterns. Even companies completely outside the cutlery industry receive contracts. Colonial Knife Company, Robeson Suredge, and Ontario Knife all produce variants. The specifications are so precise that knives from different manufacturers are functionally identical. A Marine can break his Ka-Bar handle and replace it with parts from a knife manufactured by a different company. Wartime modifications simplify production without changing the core design. Some manufacturers use different leather treatments on handles, some stamp markings in different locations, but every knife features the 7-inch 1095 carbon steel blade, the stacked leather handle, the steel guard, and pommel. The design proves so robust that even cost-cutting measures don't degrade performance. By the end of the Pacific War, over 1 million Ka-Bar pattern knives have been manufactured. The knife serves in every theatre. It works in the frozen Aleutians. It works in the burning Solomons. It works in the steaming Philippine jungles. It works. Japanese soldiers begin recognizing captured Ka-Bars as superior to their own issue blades. Some American troops report finding Japanese dead with Ka-Bars that had clearly been carried as acquired equipment. By August 1945, the Ka-Bar has engaged the enemy on every Pacific island and proven itself the most reliable close combat weapon the United States has ever fielded. Korea brings the Ka-Bar back to war in 1950. The frozen mountains and close-range firefights of that conflict prove ideal testing grounds for equipment reliability. Knives that had spent 5 years in storage depots emerge functional. Marines at the Chosin Reservoir report Ka-Bars working after being frozen solid, then thawed. The leather handles don't crack in sub-zero temperatures. The carbon steel, properly maintained, doesn't become brittle. The simple design means there are no complex parts to fail. Through 3 years of Korean combat, the Ka-Bar continues proving John Davis's original insight. Complexity is the enemy of reliability. Vietnam sees the Ka-Bar in jungle warfare again, now carried by Marines, Army Special Forces, and Navy SEALs. The humid environment that destroys complex equipment leaves the ka-bar functional. Troops learn to maintain the carbon steel blade with oil, preventing rust. The knife serves in tunnel fighting, where its 7-inch blade provides reach without being unwieldy in confined spaces. It serves in jungle ambushes. It serves in base perimeter defense. By the 1970s, the Marine Corps officially adopts newer knife designs with synthetic handles and stainless steel blades, expecting to retire the ka-bar pattern. The opposite happens. Many Marines continue carrying K-bars privately purchased or inherited from previous generations. Special Operations Forces never abandon the design. Delta Force operators are photographed in Grenada carrying K-bars in 1983. SEALs carry them in Panama in 1989. When the Gulf War begins in 1991, nearly 50 years after the knife's adoption, K-bars are still going to combat. Armored vehicle crews carry them because the robust blade can pry open jammed hatches. Pilots carry them because the knife can cut through aircraft structure in an emergency. Infantry carry them because, despite the availability of modern multi-tools and tactical knives with every feature imaginable, the ka-bar still does exactly what it was designed to do. It provides an indestructible blade that works when everything else fails. The 21st century brings renewed K-bar production for military contracts. In 2001, the Marines issue a modernized version with a synthetic handle, but the same blade geometry Davis designed in 1942. The knife deploys to Afghanistan, where it proves effective in mountain warfare. It deploys to Iraq, where it serves in urban combat. In 2017, a Marine Corps photograph from Syria shows a gunnery sergeant carrying an original pattern ka-bar with stacked leather handle. The knife in that photograph could be 75 years old, passed down through generations, still functional. Modern variants include models with different blade coatings, synthetic handles in multiple colors, saw-backed spines, and glass-breaker pommets. But the core design remains unchanged. 7-inch blade, 1095 carbon steel, or similar modern equivalents, clip point geometry, simple construction. K-bar Knives, the company that grew from Union Cutlery, still manufactures the knife to original specifications. Ontario Knife holds current military contracts. The design that was supposed to cost $2.75 and serve through one war has now engaged enemies across 80 years of continuous conflict. It has fought in the Pacific Islands, frozen Korean mountains, Vietnamese jungles, Middle Eastern deserts, and Central Asian highlands. It has served every generation of American service members since 1943. Calculations show that between wartime production, post-war military contracts, and commercial sales, more than 14 million ka-bar pattern knives have been manufactured. The design is public domain. The original patents long expired. Anyone can legally produce a knife to ka-bar specifications, and numerous companies do. Why does this knife endure when thousands of newer designs claim superiority? The answer is function, reliability, and the timelessness of fundamental engineering. John Davis understood in 1942 what remains true today. In a fight, you need a tool that absolutely will not fail. The ka-bar's 7-inch blade is long enough to be effective but short enough to control. The 1/4-inch blade thickness means the knife will bend before it breaks, and a bent knife can be straightened whilst a broken knife is rubbish. The 1095 carbon steel requires maintenance but holds an edge through sustained cutting that stainless steels cannot match. The stacked leather handle provides secure grip under the worst conditions: wet, bloody, frozen, or covered in mud. Modern synthetic handles may be more durable, but they become slippery when wet. The leather compresses and conforms to the user's hand. The simple construction means the knife can be disassembled with a hammer and punch, repaired in the field, and put back into service. There are no complex locking mechanisms to fail, no moving parts to jam, no clever features that work perfectly until they don't. The blade geometry is optimized for combat, not for looking tactical. The clip point concentrates force at the tip for penetration, whilst maintaining enough belly in the blade for slashing cuts. The flat grind creates a strong edge that's easy to maintain with field equipment. Modern tactical knives often feature partial serrations, finger grooves, elaborate guards, and multifunction capabilities. The K-bar does one thing: it provides a reliable fighting blade. It was never meant to be a survival knife, a utility tool, or a camping implement, though it functions adequately in all these roles. It was designed to kill enemy soldiers in close combat and to survive the sustained abuse that combat environments inflict on equipment. 80 years of service prove the design succeeds. The knife's manufacturing legacy is staggering. During the Second World War, over 1 million were produced under military contract. Post-war production for military and commercial markets continued without interruption. Through Korea, Vietnam, and subsequent conflicts, both military procurement and civilian sales maintained production. By conservative estimates, military contracts since 1943 total approximately 3 million knives. Commercial production for the civilian market, where K-bar pattern knives are popular with hunters, outdoorsmen, collectors, and those who appreciate owning a piece of military history, accounts for approximately 11 million additional knives. The design's public domain status means exact figures are impossible, as numerous manufacturers produce K-bar pattern knives without trademark restrictions. Ontario Knife Company produces them for current military contracts. K-bar Knives manufactures commercial versions. International companies produce licensed and unlicensed copies. The state of New York, where Union Cutlery originated the design, recognizes the K-bar as part of the state's industrial heritage. Museums display wartime examples alongside modern variants, showing how little has changed. A civilian can purchase a functionally identical K-bar today for approximately $80, receiving a knife built to the same specifications that served at Guadalcanal. The fact that a design from 1942 remains commercially viable, competing successfully against modern tactical knives with advanced materials and features, demonstrates its fundamental superiority in the role for which it was designed. The ultimate validation is simple. After 80 years, millions of knives produced and service in every major American conflict since the Second World War, the K-bar has proven one thing absolutely: it works. Modern knives offer advantages in corrosion resistance, in weight reduction, in maintenance reduction. Ceramic blades don't rust. Titanium handles weigh less. Stainless steels require less care. But when soldiers deploy into combat environments where their lives depend on their equipment functioning under maximum stress, many still choose the K-bar. Special operations forces, who can carry any knife they want, continue selecting it. The design that John Davis created in upstate New York solved the problem of combat knife failures in 1942. It continues solving that problem today. The knife has traveled an improbable distance from its origins. It was supposed to be a wartime expedient, a simple fighting knife to address a specific crisis in the Pacific. Instead, it became immortal. The K-bar has outlasted the war that created it, outlasted the designer who built it, outlasted the company that first manufactured it, and outlasted every knife design that was supposed to replace it. It remains in frontline service as this script is written, carried by Marines who are the great-grandchildren of the men who first carried it at Guadalcanal. Some weapons are revolutionary, some are reliable, some are elegant. The K-bar is all three, and its endurance is testament to the power of design that prioritizes function above all else. The opening scene at Guadalcanal showed a Marine dying because his knife failed when he needed it most. John Davis solved that problem with 7 inches of carbon steel and a stacked leather handle. Mitchell Page proved it in combat. Millions of service members have carried it since. 80 years later, the Ka-Bar is still going to war. It was supposed to cost $2.75 and last until 1945. Instead, it became the most successful fighting knife in American military history, a weapon so fundamentally correct in its design that 8 decades of technological advancement cannot improve on its core concept. The knife that was meant to serve 1 generation has now served 4, and there is no indication it will ever truly be retired. In the simplicity of its design and the brutality of its function, the Ka-Bar remains what John Davis intended, a tool that absolutely will not fail when a soldier's life depends on it working.